Lighting is looking so good. Hello, Rattly friends. No VWA this week. I'm sorry. Some of you heard. If you're following me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter. I talk about the videos all the time. My camera was derping out like a couple of days ago, and I lost like an hour of work. And that was kind of really disheartening because, you know, my time is really limited. So if I just lose the ability to make a video, it's kind of crushing for the rest of my day. So I thought until I am able to sort out that problem, I'm going to be focusing on smaller, quicker videos. And with that said, actually, I wanted to do a kind of a mini-series on world building because I get lots of questions. And I have been very bad about answering questions on world building. So I thought, you know what? Let's begin. Let's take this as a great chance to actually talk about world building, particularly with dealing with some genres. Now, before we go anywhere, allow me to make the formal disclaimer and remind you all that the following is merely my advice, my opinion, and what worked for me. Don't take it as gospel, you know the drill. Let's dive right in. Let me tell you a little story, okay? Some of you know I love characters. Characters are the most fun for me when it comes to stories, and they're kind of what I'm in for. You know, settings are pretty interesting, yes, but ultimately I'm there for the players, okay? It's not the engine, it's not the world. To me, it's the characters, because they're the ones who are driving the story forward. And I was recently talking with a friend about the Hunger Games, and we were talking about books in general, and a point came to mind, because if you know me, and if you've been following my blog, you already know what this is going to be, but I hate it when there's a clear hero and villain in a story, because that sort of black-white morality does not appeal to me at all. I am the sort of person who enjoys being able to see a story through anyone's point of view. So when you clearly give me an unrelatable, unredeemable person who is clearly evil, I feel really turned off because it just throws me out of the story. Evil to me is not a real thing. It's not a real human trait. What are human traits? Bitterness, anger, sadness, despair, the sort of things that all of us can become. So when you brand a character as evil, I kind of lose the ability to connect with them because they're becoming incredibly inhuman. So as we were talking about stuff like this, and I realized that I was going over some characters that, you know, were kind of in the back of my mind, and one of them is the main antagonist of the Hunger Games, President Snow. And a thought came to mind, actually. For those of you who are familiar with R.A. Salvatore, he did a really old Q&A, like, I'm talking like 5 years ago, at a D&D convention, I think, and he did one of his best like speeches, and I love it. But one of his lines is that one of his best lines is that no one gets up in the morning and says, "I think I will do evil today." And while I was thinking about that line, I did an extension of it. You know, nobody gets up in the morning and says, "I think I'll do evil today." The same way that nobody gets up in the morning and says, "I am going to murder one child from every one of these districts every year." And I began thinking about that. I began trying to put myself in the head of President Snow. Now, of course, as some of you can imagine, the way that my brain works is that it began to snowball out of control. I began taking this idea that nobody gets up in the morning and says, "I'm going to start a totalitarian state." And one of the things that bothered me, and I guess I have to give props to the Hunger Game movies for giving us a little bit more of a Snow's point of view, because I know that the story is told from the point of view of Katniss, so I understand that. But as I was, you know, snowballing out of control with this idea, I realized, as I mentioned, that I felt that I hadn't been given the full story. And I feel like that's one of those things that Dystopian tends to deal with a lot, that we're just dropped in a world that has gone to hell, and we don't get to see how the hell was worse before this. Because, as I've mentioned, no one starts a totalitarian state because they want to, you know? And I couldn't help but try to put myself on the shoes of President Snow and think to myself, how awful was the world before the Hunger Games? That the Hunger Games became the best course of action. Seriously, think about it. You know, what was going on that was so badly? How had the world gone through so much hell that this other hell became the best course of action? So right about this point, you can imagine that I was terribly wishing, that there was a dystopian story from the point of view of the totalitarian leader trying to maintain control. Control while all of these like revolutionary groups are trying to basically stir trouble once again. And of course, I know that that's not what the Hunger Games deal with, but it's the idea of like, I would have loved to see President Snow going through this decline into this idea of the only way we can maintain order is by oppressing everyone and scaring them so badly That they are not gonna be doing any more of this crap again. And again, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the way that I enjoy consuming stories, but that to me is incredibly interesting. Because again, as I've mentioned, there ain't no good, there ain't no evil, there is just people who want things, and some are willing to hurt others. Simple as that. Now, if you're asking me, of all people, me, what would make Dystopian more interesting, more complex, and better? I want to see the world before everything changed. I want to see what was lost. I want to see what was gained. What was gained by the world reshaping itself and being reborn into this totalitarian state. Because again, there's always ups and downs to all changes. And above all, I want to see the people who made these tough choices. I want to see the men and women, the entire council sitting down and talking and going over things and realizing the only way we can stop the world from going into this terrible, terrible, terrible hell is to make it a different hell. Why? Because the world is not made of good and bad people. The world is made of selfish people and selfless people. And we cannot ever forget that not all revolutions are selfless, and not all kingdoms are corrupt. There are no heroes and no villains. And sometimes, the only way to save the world is to be cruel. I hope that helps. I really do hope that helps. I had fun making this video because I finally get to talk about this and talk about my ridiculous President Snow headcanon. Because, my god, once I began getting that snowball rolling, everything went out of control. And I realized some of the things, I haven't read all the Hunger Games books, but there's things that I know that are coming ahead. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, isn't it entirely possible that someone who is entirely overridden with guilt and just sadness and despair and even more guilt would keep bringing themselves back to life to never die so that no one else needs to take this burden? It's just that pieces began clicking, and it's the sort of thing that it's the worst when you make it the sort of headcanon that is not ever possible and the story's never actually going to be touching on, and that just makes me even more sad. But you know what I mean though, right? And if you've read my stories, you know the way I am. I don't believe in black and white morality. Everything is gray, because everybody wants something. And everyone is someone in LA. And that's the required musical reference of the day. Regardless of that, though, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe if you want more. And if you have any sort of ideas and recommendations or comments for future world-building tips, leave them my way. I have tons of things to share about, and the ones that people ask about will probably be made first. Regardless of that, though, if you would like even more writing advice, head over to my writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. Thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I hope to be seeing you soon. Mwah! Everyone is someone. Everyone is someone in LA. In LA.